if somebody gets their hands on Devontae Smith, now you could say, well, you know, it's difficult, and it is difficult to get your hands on Devontae Smith. But if you do, you could stone him at the line of scrimmage if you're one of those big, rangy, powerful cornerbacks like Jalen Ramsey or Marcus Lattimore or those physical guys. They could get some work done. Well, how do you deal with that? How did Alabama deal with it? Well, you get him off the line of scrimmage. You put him in motion. If he's in motion, there's no way you're getting your hands on him. Why aren't the Eagles taking advantage of that?
And I want to expound on it a little bit today, and that's attempted deception by the Philadelphia Eagles. You pointed out that they were the least motion team in the National Football League last year. Out of 32 teams, they put players in motion less than anyone else. And when Nick Sirianni was hired, we all believed it was, at least in part, because he was going to be new and creative and different and bring some things to Philadelphia that we've never seen before. Well, that did not manifest itself in motion on offensive plays called. They were pretty darn stagnant, as a matter of fact. Kudos to you for being able to spot this, go back through the research and the like. I didn't realize it last year. I remember watching games. I'm going, they don't use motion much, and shrug it off and move on thereafter. But when you make a point to the degree of 32nd out of 32 teams in the National Football League, that's something that grabs your attention. And you say, whoa, really? They didn't use it last year. Here's the question I have for you. Two questions, twofold, as a matter of fact. Number one is, why? There had to be some kind of when the head coach was the offensive coordinator in Indianapolis. They weren't 32nd in the league in motion. It might not have been a key aspect of the offense, but it wasn't dead last in the league. So why do you think it was that they were 32nd in offense? Give me some reasons behind it. And do you think that is something that they are going to realize and say, hey, we need to take slightly more advantage of it? We shouldn't be 32nd in anything in the National Football League. Why would we be 32nd? I know someone has to be, but doesn't necessarily have to be the team that you're following or rooting for. Do you think they will make a concerted effort to use more motion this year?
Yes, but not a lot. Yes, because people like me are making a big deal out of it.
It's a worthwhile big deal, Johnny Mac. Yeah. I say give yourself credit rather than second guess.
Well, I talked to a lot of people, and when because I remember Nick getting not a lot, but a little bit of grief after the Dallas game. So I went back and I looked, and sure enough, they didn't use motion once in that game. And he said, we're not going to motion just to motion, which makes sense to me, to be honest. I mean, I don't. And then you have, and I said yesterday on the show, you have the Sean McVay sort of thought process, which is the other end of the spectrum that, try to fool the opposing defense, essentially, try to get their eyes moving in the wrong direction. And I know from talking to Jim Schwartz many times, that's really affects the defense. It's really hard, especially with young players, to be disciplined, even when you know what's going on. So then I went back to when the Eagles played the Rams and they got blitzed. I think it was 37-19 in the 2020 season. And before the game, Jim was talking about it. Jim was talking about the pre-snap motion. Jim was talking about, you just got to do your job. You just got to, ignore it essentially and keep your eyes where they're supposed to be. And Rodney McLeod said the same thing. Veteran player, over 30, been around, seen it all, won a Super Bowl. And he said the same thing. And the game showed up and they couldn't do it. And they were all over the place and they're chasing ghosts. And after the game, Rodney said it. We knew what was coming. We just couldn't do it. Because it's tough to be disciplined. It's tough to communicate. It's tough to get all those 11 pieces on the same page. So I do think there's value in motion. I do think it's overrated to a certain degree, um, especially when it comes to the quarterback. A lot of people think motion is designed to give the quarterback information. It's usually not. Quarterbacks like Tom Brady, they're just going to read the middle linebacker for protection. They're going to read the free safety, and they're going to figure out what the coverage is. I mean, those guys know because they've done it, they've seen everything. You don't need to give them information. They know. Listen to Tony Romo in the booth. Tony Romo will tell you what's coming because he knows what's coming from where the free safety is and what the coverage is going to be. Those types of quarterbacks don't need information pre-snap. So it's not about that, and I think a lot of people think it is. But it is about taking advantage of, certain unique talents. The Eagles happen to have one. And I mentioned that yesterday as well in Devontae Smith. We all talked about Devontae Smith's lack of size, and it proved to be overblown because he's a really good player, and he stayed healthy, and hopefully that continues. But you know what? He is 166 pounds, and if you do have a big corner, like AJ Brown's going to be able to get off press coverage. AJ Brown's going to be able to get off press coverage because he's 226 pounds. And he's stronger than everybody else out there. If somebody gets their hands on Devontae Smith, now you can say, well, it's difficult, and it is difficult to get your hands on Devontae Smith. But if you do, you could stone him at the line of scrimmage if you're one of those big, rangy, powerful cornerbacks like Jalen Ramsey or Marcus Lattimore or those physical guys. They could get some work done. Well, how do you deal with that? How did Alabama deal with it? Well, you get him off the line of scrimmage. You put him in motion. If he's in motion, there's no way you're getting your hands on him. Why aren't the Eagles taking advantage of that? Like that, to me, that little piece and that little player, and that when I talk to scouts and I talk to coaches, that's what they kept saying. In the modern game, there are certain players you can utilize in motion that it's going to make their job easier. For the Eagles, Devontae Smith is number one for me because he's so good at it. But Quez Watkins is in the same boat as well. As not a bigger receiver who and probably is an even better example because he's a speed guy, right? He's not going to beat you running routes at this stage of his career. So some of those corners I mentioned, if they get their hands on Quez Watkins, well, it's it, man. You just blew up the play. The timing is gone. Even if he gets open, it's not going to be at the standpoint the quarterback is looking for it, and we saw that a number of times where you say, Jalen's got to get the ball out, or he didn't throw the ball on time. Well, maybe, but maybe the receiver wasn't where he was supposed to be on time. Like there's so many, and Nick Sirianni talked about this after the Giants game. I remember we had this big conversation about the play where all the fans were taking the screenshots and Devontae's open and he missed them. And Nick went into this, and I give him credit. He went into this basically dissertation. He was like, man, those guys, and he was talking about Devontae and Quez at the time, they ran the wrong route. They were at the wrong depth. They weren't where they were supposed to be. There's all these different things. And the one thing, every coach will tell you as a receiver, you cannot fool the quarterback. And by that, they mean you have to be where you're supposed to be at all times for the quarterback, and that means depth. That means if it's supposed to be run at 6 yards, it's supposed to be run at 6 yards, not 7, not 5. That's the kind of attention to detail Nick Sirianni talks about, especially a receiver, because he's a former receiver. He gets into it. But there's all these different things that come to it. But the bottom line is, Jody, when you talk about motion, 32 is 32. Everybody's using it more than you. Now, you say Indianapolis used it, but they were always bottom 5. when Shane Steichen was with the Chargers, they were 28th or 29th. So there's nobody on this coaching staff who uses motion consistently. But you got to use it a little bit more, especially when you have a star player like Devontae Smith who can really, really take advantage of it. And so I think it's a catch-22. Is it as important as people make it out to be? Probably not. Is it important though? Can you utilize it better? Yes, definitely. That's what I would say.
I think your Quez Watkins point holds more water than your Devontae Smith. And I didn't watch every single snap of all 17 Eagle games on all 22 to find out exactly how much this played in. But if I'm an NFL defense, if I got Jalen Ramsey, all right, I feel confident Jalen Ramsey can do whatever he needs to do on any given play. And last year, of course, Devontae was Eagles' #1 wide receiver. This year, debatable with A.J. Brown here. So you're going to have Jalen Ramsey available to cover Devontae Smith. Well, it doesn't matter because Eagles don't play the Rams this year, but you get my point. You want to get your cornerback up? You want to challenge Devontae Smith? Okay, fine. You're right. If your guy gets perfect positioning against him, gets his hands on him, gets leverage against him, you can take Devontae out of his route. And that can be majorly disadvantageous to any play that you're calling. But if you miss, Devontae Smith can make you pay because he's that good at running routes. He's going to have a step on you. He's going to be able to execute. The receiver gets open enough. The quarterback's going to be able to get him the ball. Big play, a first down, if not further down the field than that. You take your chances when you do that with any wide receiver in the league, and there are some you would take more chances against than others. Devontae Smith is one that I would be careful. I don't care if he's 166 pounds. He's got the skills. He's got the moves. He's got the ability to, once he gets a half a step on you, really make you pay. And this year it's going to be even more so because you got A.J. Brown playing against him. So it's going to be a secondary corner that's going to try and take that advantage over him as a reason why you're a secondary corner and not the best corner on your defense. You're not that good. And Devontae Smith is going to make you pay. So if we're talking about just one-on-one battles at the line of scrimmage, I'll take my chances with Devontae Smith against basically any cornerback in the league and say he's going to win the fight more often than he's going to lose it. So I don't think that getting Devontae Smith open is the #1 reason that the Eagles should run more motion. Quez is a good point because Quez doesn't have the capabilities of Devontae Smith. He's got pure speed, and the only way he's going to be able to make you pay is if you don't get the perfect leverage defensive play against him, he's going to have to beat you downfield. It's not going to be that he's going to break off some great route and get separation against you and be able to move the chains. So if they were to use more motion this year, I would think it would be more for a guy like Quez. And the other thing you think of when you think motion is you put your running back in motion. And the Eagles right now have 3 guys in their running back depth chart with Miles on top and Boston Scott and Kenny Gainwell. And they really didn't use those guys in motion much. Do you think it's because that's the way that this offensive coaching staff coaches? You gave us some numbers about what it was like in both Indianapolis and San Diego, some stops that they were at prior to getting here. Do you think it was a running back thing that they looked at the guys that they have on the roster and just said, no, it doesn't give us enough of an advantage. Why would we do it if we don't think it actually gives us an advantage? How much of that decision-making process do you think last year was talent on the roster specific at the running back position?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was talent specific at both receiver and running back, but wherever I went, I was told, nah, that's not the issue. I take Nick at his word when he says we're not going to motion just to motion. In his mind, he doesn't think it's as valuable as Sean McVay. I use Andy Reid as well, but Andy doesn't talk about it as much. Andy uses a boatload of motion. And they also happen to be obviously 2 successful offensive coaches, to say the least. Maybe the 2 most successful, but they do have significant talent. And maybe it just comes down to the Eagles getting better players and things will look better. I expect him to be bottom 5 in motion again because the head coach doesn't believe in it. The offensive coordinator doesn't believe in it. But in getting back to Devontae, it's not about it's not about he can't beat press coverage. It's about, all right, you just watched him at Alabama. Watch how Alabama used him. If you can help a great player, if you can affect the defense, why not do it? I mean, you spent a whole draft process evaluating a guy who won the Heisman Trophy at the preeminent college program in the country, and they used him in motion constantly. When you say, oh, he does that well, let's put that in. Or he does this well, let's try that. And from that standpoint, it doesn't make any sense to me. Now, they didn't have the big X receiver that they could put on the line of scrimmage last year. So you're right, A.J. Brown's going to help because right now he's going to be off the line of scrimmage. So he's not going to need as much help. But and forget about that word because that's probably a bad word. It's not even about help. It's about he's going to have room to get off the line of scrimmage more. However, if you can do what the Rams did against the Eagles, what Rodney McLeod was talking about, and everybody knows what's coming, but you're testing the discipline and the communication of the defense, and you get them chasing ghosts, why not give it a try on occasion? You know, they might know what it's going to be, but it's easy to say, all right, I got this rookie corner. I got this second-year corner. This is what they're going to do if they motion Devontae Smith here. Don't worry about it. You're in zone coverage, but they go fishing because in their mind there's like, oh, there's Devontae Smith, and I'm taking a false step. It might be as simple as that, Jody. It might be one false step, and then somebody on the other side is open, and that's what the Rams do. And that's what Sean calls it. He calls it the illusion of complexity. It looks complex to the outside eye, but to the Rams, it's really, really stinking simple. Really simple. But all the moving, all the bells and whistles, all the eyewash, it creates doubt in the defense. That's what I thought. I got to be honest. That's what I thought we were getting when Nick Sirianni and Shane Steichen got here. That type of young mentality, and everybody, for better or for worse, Jody, everybody in this league thinks Sean McVay's the guy. That's what I thought we were getting closer to. It turns out they were backing up from that even further. That was a surprise to me. Not necessarily a good surprise, a bad surprise, but it was a surprise. In other words, the narrative with Doug Peterson, he got stale. He wasn't creative. How many times did you hear that? And he didn't know this. Now, Doug learned under Andy Reid. Doug used a lot more motion, not as much as Andy, but a lot more than Nick. That surprised me. That I got to be honest. I wasn't expecting that. Now, it's all about execution. I always say, look, the Philly special, right? The most famous play in Eagles history. Not the most important, but probably the most famous. That's looked upon as very creative and very, because it was exciting. You don't see it all the time, and they executed. Now, you and I both know if Trey Burton, who isn't used to handling the football at that time, if he drops the football, if he just a little bit outside with the pass, and he was a former high school quarterback, but we're talking high school, a little bit off, it looks like the dumbest play in the history of mankind. The Patriots did the same thing. Their play worked,
right?
But the play was just a little bit off. Brady couldn't come down with it. And then it's forever, you got a million mimes if Tom Brady can't catch the football, right? That's the razor thin line of genius, and you're the dumbest guy in the history of the planet. But the point of the whole thing is it's always about execution. It's always about, do the players execute what's called? And if the Eagles executed some of those 97 bubble screens we saw in the first 7 weeks of the season, we wouldn't be talking about those 97 bubble screens like they were a disaster. They didn't execute them. So it's all perception. And that's what I kind of wrote about. It's like, if you keep going down this route and the players don't execute, the perception is going to be you're not very creative offensively. And that could be dangerous.
The thing that scares me is, and you did a good job of going back and tracking with the history of both the offensive coordinator and the head coach when they were in positions with other organizations, exactly what the percentage was of how much motion they used. I still have a fear that part of it is you have to have confidence in the ability of your quarterback to be able to get the small advantage. Sometimes it's no advantage whatsoever. Sometimes the defense stays disciplined and it ends up being zero advantage. But if there's an advantage there to be had and it's split second, your quarterback's got to be able to take that advantage. And I'm not sure that the Eagles had that kind of faith in Jalen Hurts. But now we're back talking about the quarterback again.
Well, real quick, Jody, because I know we got to get to our first break, but because you bring that up, the Eagles have so much respect, and I'm talking mainly about Nick Sirianni and Shane Steichen. They have so much respect for Phillip Rivers. It's kind of frightening. I mean, they just love the guy, and rightfully, he's another veteran quarterback. They didn't use motion with him.
Yeah.
So that's where I went down. I went down the same route as you. That was my first thought. They're trying to make things simpler for Jalen Hurts, and everybody I talked to, I talked to a Hall of Fame coach, and I talked to a couple different scouts, and they said the same thing. It's not about getting information for the quarterback motion. That those guys, Phillip Rivers being the perfect example. I use Tom, but for this coaching staff, they had Phillip Rivers. They didn't use it, and Phillip knows what's going on. So that kind of hit home with me. It's like, well, you could say you're trying, because that was my first thought. They're trying to protect Jalen Hurts. Were they trying to protect Phillip Rivers? No. They think Phillip knows more than they do. But I mean, and he probably does, to be honest, from an NFL quarterback standpoint. They just don't like motion.
Right. And here's, and I've never talked to Phillip Rivers and or Sirianni or Steichen about it, but I guarantee you there are quarterbacks that prefer not to have motion, that they are going to try and get the pre-snap information that they want, that they're going to use in their judgment with a stagnant defense. That just let me move up to the line of scrimmage and let me read off that. If we go to motion, perhaps we do move a defensive player, and then I'm not going to be able to get as good a read. So it comes down to comfort level of the quarterback as well, that there are some quarterbacks that probably don't want motion, that they want to be able to just stand behind the center, take that split second, look exactly where everybody is, and believe that the play that they're going to that they've called is going to work because of the positioning of the defense. That there might be some to that. I don't know if Phillip Rivers is that kind of guy, but that might have been the reason why they didn't use that much motion when they had Phillip Rivers as well in both San Diego and in Indianapolis. All right, J-Mac, John McMullen and Jody McDonald here with you on Birds 365. I will come back, John. I want to touch on an article I saw over the weekend in Bleacher Report, of all places. And I don't know about you, but I go to Bleacher Report more for my NBA writing than my football writing. But they've got a couple of decent football guys. And a guy made a interesting observation and or a ranking, a list. We're just coming to the end of list season. But he had a list of teams that are in a month, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months from now going to look back and go, yeah, we had a regrettable offseason. that they just haven't upgraded the roster, and they look to be no better a team than they finished up 2021, if not a worse team. Some interesting names on that list, and a couple of interesting, at least from my opinion, names that aren't on that list. I'll explain when we come back. I need your take on it. John McMullen, Jody McDonald, your Birds 365 guys.